In our last episodes, we delved into the stormy centuries where early Christians, persecuted and oppressed, held to their faith under the ruthless might of the Roman Empire. But everything changed after 313 AD. Under Emperor Constantine, Christianity became a pawn in a grand scheme. Constantine's so-called conversion turned the faith into a vehicle of political power, merging biblical principles with pagan traditions, sun worship, and Roman authority. This new form of Christianity, with Sunday enshrined by civil law, was a far cry from what the apostles taught, and yet it spread with unstoppable force. Now we step deeper into the shadows. With the Roman Catholic Church crowned as the official state religion, the message was clear: obey, conform, or face the consequences. Join us as we uncover one of history's darkest chapters, where unwavering power and religious control met those who defied Rome's laws. The true believers who kept God's Sabbath would now face betrayal, violence, and relentless persecution for refusing to bow to the dictates of Rome. This is the story of the Church's iron grip, a tale of domination, suppression, and the heartbreaking cost of holding to God's commandments in the face of a rising empire of oppression. From 380 to 391 AD, Roman Emperor Theodosius I did something that would forever alter the path of Christianity. Through a series of decisive councils and edicts, he declared the Roman Catholic Church as the only legitimate religion of the Roman Empire. Every citizen, whether Jew, pagan, or Christian, was now subject to the rules and teachings of this new form of Christianity. But this was not the Christianity rooted in the teachings of Christ or the apostles. This was the Roman Empire's version of Christianity, an empire-driven institution designed not only to unify, but to dominate at all costs. With the Roman Catholic Church now empowered as the only official state religion, laws quickly targeted any form of worship deemed heretical or Jewish. The Sabbath, a core tenet of early Christianity, became a reason for suspicion. Any who observed it in place of Sunday worship faced immediate scorn and soon worse. By 395 AD, Theodosius had outlawed nearly all practices that did not align with the state religion of the Roman Catholic Church. Traditional Christians who still clung to God's Sabbath, who held fast to the commandments as given by God and His holy word, soon found themselves at odds with a false Christian religion that demanded total compliance. The empire, with the Roman Church at its helm, began instituting laws that struck at the heart of faithful Christians. It wasn't enough that they worshiped Christ. They had to worship Christ according to the Roman Catholic version of Christianity that had no basis in the Scriptures. Any Christian groups that did not bow to the Roman Catholic Church, including Sabbath keepers, were declared enemies of the state, fined heavily, their property often seized. Many faced prison, or worse, as punishment for following the day of rest God had commanded from the beginning. This wasn't just law. It was control, manipulation, and an attempt to rewrite worship itself, enforced by persecution that gradually became worse and worse, eventually punishable by death. As the power of the Roman Catholic Church increased, so too did the influence of Rome's pagan heritage. Statues and icons began appearing in places of worship, images of saints mingling with images once reserved for gods. People were now encouraged to pray to saints, martyrs, and Mary as the Queen of Heaven, a direct influence from the goddess worship found in Roman paganism. The Sabbath was no longer even mentioned. The focus was solely Sunday, the day of the Roman sun god, aligning perfectly with Rome's ancient reverence of Sol Invictus. But not everyone conformed. While the Roman Church reigned in the cities and enforced its laws with the sword, there remained those who held to God's law. These faithful followers kept the Sabbath, meeting in secret places, gathering to worship the Creator, refusing to bow to Rome's corruption of God's word and commands. They knew the risks. For them, persecution was inevitable. To follow the Sabbath and disobey Rome was now seen as an act of rebellion, a refusal to acknowledge the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. Rome's intolerance reached a fever pitch. Christians who refused to accept the doctrines of Rome were labeled heretics. The Sabbath keepers, seen as Jews or worse, as rebels, found themselves hunted. The punishments became worse and worse over time, beginning with fines, then imprisonment, then torture, and finally even death. This was a new age of martyrdom, but this time it was Christians persecuting Christians. The Roman Catholic Church labeled them as enemies for choosing to follow God's commandments and words over man-made teachings and traditions. For those faithful Christians, true worship meant obedience to God, even if it meant facing death. Behind this orchestrated persecution was a theological shift led by figures such as Eusebius and other prominent church leaders, who redefined Christian doctrines to suit Roman ideals. Church leaders manipulated and edited sacred texts to emphasize submission to the church, portraying Sunday worship as a tradition supposedly passed down from the apostles. But it was all a lie, a means to enforce conformity. They called it orthodoxy, but for those who held fast to God's law, it was apostasy. Through clever deception and rewriting of doctrine, the Roman churches in Rome and Alexandria created a faith built on submission to the Roman Empire, not the truth of God's word. The true followers of Christ went underground. These faithful ones clung to God's word and law, refusing to accept the Roman perversion of their faith. They believed in the Bible, followed the Sabbath, and would not bow to Rome's forced Sunday worship. In exile and hiding, they carried on the faith that Jesus taught, rejecting the paganized version of Christianity that dominated the empire. They knew the cost of true faith, and they were willing to pay it. This chapter of history may shock you. It may seem like a tale from a distant past, but the struggle over God's Sabbath commandment has never truly ended. As we look back on this era, where power and faith collided, let us remember the courage of those who stood for truth. These believers faced persecution not just from pagans, but from their own brethren in a system that had sold out to political power. Let this history remind us of the importance of God's commands, unchanging, eternal, and true. The Sabbath was never man's to give or take away. So let us not forget. When God tells us to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and the world tells us to forget, each one of us has a decision and a choice to make. Who should I choose to believe and follow? The teachings and traditions of men that have forsaken God and His Word? Or do I choose to remain faithful and believe and obey what God's Word says? In our next episode, we will delve even further into the shocking history of Sabbath persecution, now spreading across Europe and beyond as the Roman Catholic Church's power reaches its height. Join us as we continue uncovering the true cost of faith, integrity, and the struggle to keep God's commandments, no matter the cost. The journey continues.